All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for the HPB study session. We actually have an incredibly full and super interesting agenda. So if nobody has any objections or announcements they want to make or anything, I think we should just jump right into it. And a question for you, Andrea. You mentioned we have a guest on tonight.
Yes.
Do you want to introduce her first, or do you want to tackle the study session topics first? Whatever you want.
Well, I'll go ahead and introduce her since she is on the meeting with us, so we all know who this person is on our screen down here. This is Erica Duvik, and she works for the State Historic Preservation Office, the SHPO, as the CLG coordinator. So she works with all of the CLGs across the state. Big job. And as part of our CLG certification as a city, we need to be evaluated by the state every 4 years. And so as part of that evaluation, Erica, as the coordinator, attends one of the HPB meetings. And so Erica, if you just want to say a quick hi, that'd be great.
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Like Andrea said, that's exactly why I'm here. So for the most part, you won't hear anything from me, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have at any time.
So Erica, you're evaluating us tonight, is that right?
That is correct.
Uh-oh, okay, everybody. Bring your A game. Okay, well, I think that I would like to just go ahead and turn it over to you, Andrea, to jump into our study session topics.
Okay, so the first item being the presentation.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So as the HPB knows, there are 3 work groups set up to do the research and help prepare the application for the upcoming Downtown Historic District application that Council has directed staff to put together with assistance from HPB. And we have Group 1 working really very hard and nearly completing all of their project already for updating Main Street and Alamo Avenue and the side streets in between. They're updating the survey that was done in 1997. And what they're going to present tonight was the work that they had done in time for the deadline for this meeting in PowerPoint. And so I'll just turn it right over to Chris to make the PowerPoint presentation. And I think, as you all know, Rick Cronenberger is also on work group 1. And then after Chris finishes her presentation, there can be some discussion. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, and so at first I want to throw out a thank you because Kim came out with both me and Rick to look at buildings on Alamo, and then Andy came out with me, and we went back and took pictures of a bunch of stuff and kind of did a double check on the cross streets and part of Main Street. Rick and I went out, Kim and Rick went out, like there was a whole, between the 4 of us, we kind of combed the streets a couple times. So I appreciate both Kim and Andy being willing to come out and help us sort through everything in the downtown. So much appreciated. And Andrea and I had a couple of last minute panic attacks with this PowerPoint. So I'm gonna hope that this works. Share screen, let's see. I apologize, my computer seems to be very slow tonight. Oh, come Technology has not been my friend all day today. Okay, so the question is, can you see the screen that says Littleton? Like, is it the PowerPoint? Is it showing?
Nope.
No.
No.
Oh, yes, now, okay, has
Okay.
started screen sharing. There it is, yay.
Okay, hallelujah. Okay. So this is the Downtown Historic Resurvey update that we are going through. And this is just going to show you pictures of Alamo. You know, we've been talking about Main Street for a while now, and I think we're all kind of familiar with what's going on Main Street. So this is really to look at if we are going to extend the district to include Alamo. And so the pictures you're going to see in this presentation deal with what's on Alamo Street. And this is our building at the corner of Rapp and Alamo. It's kind of been called a number of different styles, types, materials, all kinds of stuff. But really, you know, it's an important building sitting at the gateway into part of downtown when you're coming from the west. And the view towards the west when you're standing at this corner is phenomenal. And so this is really a key location along Alamo that we don't want to forget about. So when we looked at the buildings, most of what we're comparing it to is, you know, we're not going back to when it was first constructed and how much it changed from the date of construction, because Tom and Lori Simmons with Front Range Research did that when they completed the 1997 survey. This is to assess the integrity, you know, what's changed since Tom and Lori surveyed it in 1997. And so with this building here, 2626, you can see this building has had significant changes. It was a craftsman style building. It was a duplex, it was residential. They've pretty much changed everything on this building. They've added window openings where there were not window openings before. The porch has been completely changed. They added sliding glass entries. The siding has been changed. Pretty much everything you could possibly imagine has been changed. There's a huge rear addition on this building. So this one has been significantly impacted. You know, I guess we always say that every building can be restored if you throw enough money at it. But, you know, this is one that has really gone almost too far to be, you know, brought back. And so, you know, this is one that we would definitely have to look at with work group number 2 as far as contributing or non-contributing status in a district expansion. But this one has seen significant changes. As has 2516. This was a duplex at the time of the survey in 1997. When we surveyed it, it's now a quadplex, so it's 4 buildings. It's had a large rear addition. There's been some siding changes. There's decorative shingles kind of in the upper gable portion that did not exist before, so it's something that somebody added. The windows have been replaced. There have been some windows added. So this is another one that's had significant changes. The basic form is somewhat still there. I mean, you can still recognize that it's the same building, but it has gone through a lot of changes. And that western side, so the right side in the picture, faces a parking lot. So when you see it on that side, like there are really, it's really obvious how much has been added onto the building, in addition to window changes and siding. So that's another one that we would have to really look at the contributing and non-contributing status of. This one here is, everybody knows this cute little English Norman cottage at 2606. Moderate changes, and the reason we say that is it's had the The awnings have been added. It's not a horrible change. It's something that can be removed. The bigger change here are the windows. So they've replaced the divided light windows with just fixed windows and a double hung window, more modern. They kind of jump out at you from the when you just look at the building. And so something more sympathetic could be put in for sure. Obviously, we can never recapture the original windows once they've been removed, but at the very least, we could look at something more appropriate to the building. Kim and I walked around this whole building, and although there's a lot on the back of it, most of the stuff on the back is original, and you can tell from the brick and the patterning and the window openings. So really, it's just the replacement of the windows and the awnings here. We have 2675, which is the Littleton Creamery. And, this building's a little interesting because when we looked at the survey form that Tom and Lori did, it talked about these bay windows on the front as being, a more recent addition. But those divided light windows are not typical of recent construction. And so to me, they feel like a very early change. I don't know if we have some older historic photos that we could look at to compare, to look at that. But in all honesty, we haven't seen a whole lot of changes on this building. Oh, wait, this is out of order. I apologize. I feel like we had another moderate one and it's missing. Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. My apologies. Everybody knows this building. This was the one that was the church. And then it's been a residence, and Rick knows a lot about this one. They changed the flat roof arches above the three windows in the gable face, and it was a structural issue. And so this is what they ended up putting in. Not ever there historically, certainly gives it more of a church type feeling. The porch is a later addition. Again, historic photos would help us pinpoint more of a date when that went in. So it's had some changes, but not enough to probably make it a non-contributing building. Again, something to discuss when we move into work group 2 with the looking at the district and counting resources for contributing or not contributing. Okay, now back to the antique store and what used to be the creamery and then the high school. So again, wanting to look at historic photos to see about these windows, but from 1997 to today, really haven't seen any significant changes. Andrea mentioned something about a rear addition. In my experience, rear additions are not as disconcerting and affecting of integrity unless they kind of dwarf and envelop the original building, which this does not. So this is one that we feel like there are just really no changes to the building. And then our last one is 2596, and everybody knows this building. And we just really couldn't find anything that had changed on this building. Needs a little bit of TLC, but overall, just looks exactly like it did when it was surveyed before, and even before the survey was done. So the next steps will be, and actually we've been able to accomplish this since this was sent to Andrea a couple of weeks ago to get everything ready for the board meeting. We have gone through and looked at the cross streets, so Prince, Nevada, Curtis, and Rapp, and taken pictures of all of those. And really, a lot of those buildings, I think there might be one that's changed significantly, but these are just a couple of the gems that we have on those cross streets that would be included in a new district expansion. the Elks building, and and Andy's favorite, the Art Moderne building here on the right. And in my personal opinion, this would be one that I would love to see individually landmarked. It's just absolutely outstanding, and original windows, and the curved corners are phenomenal. And we had a fun time walking around this building. But we do have a lot of intact resources in the cross streets as well. And so we've got a spreadsheet going. Rick has created that, and we're just kind of tweaking a few things in anticipation of passing that on to the work group 2, who will be looking at contributing and non-contributing boundaries. We've done the resurvey of Main Street as well. And I don't know how much we want to talk about Main Street, or if we want to do that here in a minute. But we've looked at all of that, and we certainly have changes that have occurred to those buildings. My conversation with Rick was that commercial buildings always engender some kind of change, because every business that goes into a commercial building in a downtown will change it to suit their needs and their clientele. And so you're always going to see some kind of alteration to a building. And so we might need to be a little bit more flexible with some of those changes that have occurred. And so we will be providing that spreadsheet to work group 2. And Andrea, I don't know how much you want to talk about as we start, trying to segue into work group 2. There might be some overlap with work group 1 and work group 2 in that transition period as they get started. But yeah, we managed to look at all those buildings, and with the help of Kim and Andy, and it's been a lot of fun to look at all those. And again, every time you go out and look at those buildings, you kind of see something different that you didn't notice before. And depending on who you're with, they see different things that you didn't always notice. And you learn different things from being out with different people when you look at them. But those were our findings. And Rick, do you want to add anything to all of that?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a summary of what we have on Main Street. Since I have the spreadsheets basically all done now, and Chris has to look at them, and then Andrew's got to fill in some information we don't have. It's a quite lengthy and informative spreadsheet, but I decided to just look at the Main Street Historic District, which is here, right? So we're all familiar with that, and compare the 1997 survey to today, just with the data that I have. We originally surveyed 55 buildings that are included in this area. 6 of them have been removed. 4 of them are new. And those 4 replace 5 of the 6 buildings. 20 of them have not had any changes done on them since 1997. So just 20 of the 55 buildings. So 35 have had minor to major restoration work. Not all of it done with certificates of appropriateness as well. Some were done on their own. And we have to kind of sort that one out. Originally, 28 of these buildings were eligible for contributing to the National Register District. And 5 of them are individually eligible. Now, I also have some of the landmark status and opt-in, but Andrew's got to kind of clean that up before we have that data put in. But, we hear comments, nobody wants downtown to change. Well, it has changed a lot. And almost all the changes to the buildings, the new ones, have been within the last 15 years. So a lot going on. And I also added up, as much as I could remember, all the businesses. We've had over 145 different businesses in those buildings since 1997.
Wow.
So
Yeah, I
probably
think
actually a little higher.
it's kind of surprising, when you said that 6 have been removed. I mean, that you do think of downtown as being a little bit static, and it was surprising to hear that 6 of the buildings have just flat been removed. So it is interesting, Rick, about the changes that have taken place down there.
Yeah, the 3 of the 6 were removed in 1998. And that's where the Main Street apartments went. Those 2 buildings would have been contributing to the National Register District if they had not been removed. They're actually pretty nice. But they weren't included in the district because we knew they were going to be torn down at the time. And then the other one is where the tavern is, and then the 2 buildings that were with the Valley Feed, where the mixed use building is, are the others. So lots of change actually downtown. Some of the buildings have had some major restoration, as we know. It's a couple of 2nd floor additions, front additions. So what's really interesting is to look at the pictures of the building the View House is in from 97 and compare it to today and see which one you like better. Because the View House is what, 4 years old now about? About 4 years old or 5 years old. So very recent change. But anyway, a lot of very interesting information that we have to move forward on our little task here.
Well, I just want to say, I think this is wonderful and very thoughtful work. I know, and Andy, I'd like to hear your impression, but when I went out individually with Chris and then with Rick, I learned so much, and it was so fascinating to really look at those buildings and talk about, what had been altered, what hadn't, what was original, and just kind of go back and forth with it. And I found it fascinating, and I would just highly recommend everyone just kind of walking and looking at those buildings. They were wonderful. Andy, do you have any recollections you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I really enjoyed it. Anytime I can go out on the street with Rick, I learn a ton. This time again with Chris, it was so fun. I didn't want it to end. I had company coming, and I was like, forget them. I want to keep doing this. So it was really fun, and it was a labor of love, just really soaking up and enjoying what we have in Littleton. And I am very excited about that building that she mentioned. We just have some real gems. We have a lot of good work to do. And I thank you for including us.
We have a good diversity of architectural styles in our city. I mean, we may only have 1 or 2 examples of each, but we have a really good diversity of them, which is nice. So.
Well, and I think that's why I feel like with that Art Moderne building, that maybe we need to look at local landmark for it, even though it would be part of a district expansion, that it's a standout Art Moderne building, and it's so intact. And to first of all acknowledge to the owners that, wow, you've done a really good job of taking care of your building, and then to recognize that with local landmark, which then opens up the door to tax credits and financial incentives that could help them continue to maintain it. I think would be wonderful, and I would absolutely love to write that local landmark application on that one. So at some point I would be interested in trying to talk with the owner, set up a meeting and talk with them about it. Because that is just instantly was my favorite building in downtown Littleton.
Yeah, it's a beauty. And it is interesting. I think as Rick mentioned, that there is significant diversity in architectural styles downtown. And so often we kind of think of Littleton as this little farm town, out on the plains. And I think it speaks to the sophistication of Littleton, even back in the day. I mean, it's an interesting way to look at the city, to think, how did those styles get here? So that's, maybe we can discuss that at theme time. Anyway, well, thank you both for your work, and I know it's ongoing. So thank you so much. And again, it's, as Andy said, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to be with you and learn from you and just participate. And it was really great. Let's see. Agenda-wise, it looks like we're to B, which is HPB. Look, I just lost it. HPB participation in the, I lost that agenda item on my iPad. I can't figure out how to get back to it.
Historic Preservation Code.
There you go. So I can never get back to it. Yes. Well, do you want to take that, Andy or Andrea?
Yeah. So we've got this big project going on with the Downtown Historic District, and now we have another one too, and that is the update of the Historic Preservation Code. And I think you all know and have all participated in the phase 2 changes to the zoning code, and that's part of the ULUC, United Land Use Code project that's going on that is expected to wrap up in 1 year from now in October 2021. And the Historic Preservation Ordinance, which is currently, for whatever reason, in the building department's title of the city code, is going to be moving over to the zoning code and will become part of that unified land use code. And it's going to be updated. So the staff would like some assistance from the HP board in discussing different policies and criteria involved in the code. And much of this hasn't been detailed out at this point right here, but we anticipate that the work will go through April, and then the draft from our consultants, Kenyon Keast Collaborative, will come out towards the end of May. And so the way we wanted to get started with it, we thought it would be great to have a group of ordinances from around the state and maybe outside the state as well, that we thought had some interesting provisions that perhaps were updated just very recently, that are very good examples of how to write a code, and also examples of ordinances from communities that are similar to Littleton. So, you know, Littleton, of course, being the small town outside of the bigger city, Denver, that then grew up to be a city of its own, mostly in the post-war years. And so with this, I think I'll just share my screen. And what I've done, what you saw in the packet, is just very initially put together some examples of communities that I thought we could talk about. And my idea for this discussion is that we would talk about what other communities, or maybe eliminate some of the communities that I've put down, would be good to create our group of peer ordinances. So you may have seen I had some homework for you over the weekend, and I know that, you know, not necessarily everyone had an opportunity to see that. You may have been out of town for the weekend. So we thought we'd get the conversation going. And if you have an idea after this meeting in the next 5 days or so, you can feel free to contact me and say, hey, can you add such and such community to the list? So here's the plan. We're going to come up with a list of communities, and then for the next meeting, that'll be November 16th, at next HPB meeting, I'll have a spreadsheet put together that will compare and contrast each of the ordinances that we come up with. Now that may be kind of a long list, and then from that, we'll have some good data to narrow it down and come up with the peer communities. I don't know how many ordinances would be on that list of peer communities. That's up for discussion as well. But that's the end goal, that group of peer communities. So as you can see here up on the screen, what I have is model model ordinance. Now, this is something I actually didn't realize that we had. I found it on the state's website, a model historic preservation ordinance for Colorado. So we should definitely use that as one of our comparisons. And then I picked Arvada, Aurora, Fort Collins, Golden, Greeley, Longmont, Louisville, and Loveland. All right. So if anyone else would just kind of like to jump in and start off the conversation, that would be great.
Andrea?
Yes.
I'll start. So Rick and I have already looked at a few of these because we were kind of, obviously in the process of talking about, integrity and, the district expansion and, what are we going to be evaluating these buildings against? We know what our district is significant for, kind of thing, but, in trying to tie all of this together, Rick had already pulled, at least 3 communities criteria for their ordinance. And I don't know if he's shared any of that with you, because I know like Golden has, 15 or 16 criteria, which some of it seems a little overkill in my opinion.
Chris, is that for the historic landmark designation?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have a lot of resources we don't
shared any
have.
of that with you.
Yeah, so I think, criteria for historic landmark designation is a big one that we want to look at. Certainly the criteria for a certificate of historic appropriateness. We'd like to look at demolition, look at the hardship clause, and, some different policies surrounding the designation process for a historic landmark or historic district. Those are just some of the things off the top of my head that I think that we would be putting before the board to discuss in future meetings.
And they don't have to be in Colorado, right, Andrea?
No, they don't. I did talk with our city attorney about that, and she felt that if we had a couple that were outside the state that we felt had some interesting provisions that we wanted to include, or perhaps they're communities that may be similar to us, that we just go ahead and try out some of those as well in our matrix.
Does Georgetown have model ordinances that we could look at? Or is that too different from Littleton?
I think Georgetown has a historic preservation ordinance.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we should look at Georgetown also.
Whoop.
Andrea, I have a couple ideas.
Yeah.
From Colorado, I would say Aspen, obviously a little unique situation there, but Aspen and Steamboat Springs and Boulder's not on the list, but I know they have some good provisions. And I think I've talked about this before, but when I worked for a consultant, I did like 100-page report of reviewing historic preservation codes.
Well, that's right.
That was like peer cities to Fort Collins. So about probably mostly 100,000 population cities. But that was nationwide, and that covered basically all the topics that you talked about. Mm-hmm. So I can send the link to that again, because that could probably be helpful in just shortcutting some of the stuff. And then
that'd be great.
Starts with some like general recommendations, and it has examples from all of the like best parts of those codes from around the country.
Okay, so Lisa, if there are some particular communities outside of Colorado that you looked at in that report that you might think also could be a peer city to Littleton, if you want to send those to me or highlight those in the report, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, I'll go back through it. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, great.
What about Pueblo?
Yeah, I was going to say Pueblo also.
Pueblo is supposed to have one of the best codes.
Yeah.
I would look at Trinidad as well.
Trinidad's very nice. That's a
Pueblo
really good place.
architecturally is more like Denver than Littleton. I mean, it was a bigger city than Denver at one time, but its commercial buildings, its government buildings are fantastic down there.
Mhm. Trinidad's a great, great suggestion.
Now, I looked at San Antonio, Texas, because I was just looking up codes that have been updated to the ULUC format. Fort Collins has been updated to that format just this year. Golden was updated to that format. I've looked at them. When I looked at the criteria real quickly to send to Chris, we redid our code starting in 97 to 2000, is approved in 2001, modified 2010. But at that time, there were very few codes in the state of Colorado. So we're one of the first ones to get on board and get a more specific code, which many of the towns, when you look at the criteria, you can see that they kind of followed us as well. I think looking at the cities that have a ULUC format would be a good one to do, because we're going to move our code into that code. And a lot of the stuff that are in codes that have to be in codes, we don't need to do a whole lot of discussion on, because they're just necessary in order to have a good preservation ordinance, such as demolition by neglect, the economic stuff, you know, all that stuff that is at the legal end of our code stuff. But I think Andrew is mentioning maybe looking at how these codes address doing certificates of appropriateness, all the Historic Preservation Board activities and how they evaluate the buildings. Criteria-wise, there's not going to be a whole lot of difference between many of the cities, because the criteria has to address the kind of resources that you have. And Golden has an awful lot, but they have mines. Boulder has mines and those kind of things that they put into their code. One thing that we don't have in our code is a cemetery, how to deal with a cemetery. And we have one of the older cemeteries in a city in the state. So that's kind of nice, and an active one. But Andrea, I was wondering just what you were thinking in terms of how we view these as model codes, and what are we looking at on that?
I'm not necessarily feeling that they're model codes. I've turned them to be peer communities in terms of a group of ordinances that we might take inspiration from or gather ideas from. We may even see pitfalls in some of them that we would want to avoid, perhaps. I think there's a lot to be learned from how other communities are handling their historic preservation programs in a number of different aspects. Some of these codes, as you have pointed out, Rick, had been updated recently. And also, as you said, Rick, you know, when the code was first done in the late 1990s, there weren't so many codes around. And it's hard when you first start to put a code together to get it just right, you know. As you go through working through criteria and through processes, there are things that you would like to improve upon. And many of these communities have done that. And so we can take advantage of that and see what they've done. And we can even, give them a call and ask them how their new criteria on such and such or process on this and that, has gone for them so far.
Yeah, it's been 20 years. I mean, that's a couple of centuries in code time. When you look at the whole history of codes, when we did it in 97 to 2000, we looked at over 100 codes from around the country. But you think about it, preservation really only began 20 years before that. So not even. So when Littleton's code was passed, we knew there would be some growing pains that would have to be addressed. And now we can look at what's happened in the past where we've had problems in our code, and then look at see how these other codes have fixed it. Lisa, when did you do your survey?
Oh, that report is from 2017. So
Okay.
would have made the changes based on that report by now.
Oh, good. That's recent, so that's nice.
Yeah. Andrea, I was just scrolling through my report, and one that I remember sticks out was Boise, Idaho.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, they have a really good, the thing that I remember that I liked a lot was they have a matrix that determines what is considered a major alteration versus a minor alteration, and what would need a certificate of appropriateness and what can just be staff approved. So I remember that sticking out.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. And that's an example of something I think is pretty tricky, how to actually word what the staff can do and what the board will do. There are a lot of gray areas in between there for a lot of lists that I've seen in the past.
And does anyone know anything about Glenwood Springs? And I'm thinking somehow, Andy, that you know stuff about Glenwood Springs. Is that right or not?
I not in this context, but I have some contacts that I can reach out to find out more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I will do that. It's interesting. Talk about great timing. I don't know if Erica wants to be put on the spot, but Erica, if you have suggestions of ones we should look at, or if you don't want to be put on the spot that way, at least give us some advice on how to compare apples to apples, how to get the proper context in evaluating. Some tips that you may have like that would be much appreciated.
Thank you for asking that, Andy. I was going to say the same thing.
Well, I've been trying to be good and keep my mouth shut here, but not say anything unless asked. I can tell you some on this list that you should definitely not look at, just because they have issues that they are dealing with locally. So you wouldn't want to add those issues to your code for sure. And we don't have to do that in a public meeting either. But, for instance, like Steamboat Springs, I know they're working on theirs. Golden, Georgetown, Aspen, they all have some very specific things that you should, not necessarily that you can't look at them, but you just need to be aware of that there are some very unique things that you probably would not want to implement, but I think those will be obvious to you as well. And well, of course, Trinidad's is actually relatively new since they've kind of restarted their program. But yeah, otherwise, I think you have some good ones here. And our model ordinances, not to plug them for you, but that's actually kind of a recent project that Mark Rodman finished. And we actually have 3 different ones, depending on like what level of preservation your community is engaged in. So there's like a limited, a basic, and then an expanded, which has kind of all the bells and whistles that you might want to include. So I always like to recommend using that as a starting point, just because that's, already been reviewed by attorneys, already been reviewed by a lot of different CLGs. So yeah, definitely worth taking a look there. But yeah, if there's any, specific elements of a code that you guys are interested in, I would be happy to try and point you in the right direction. Of course, we also have the CLG mailing list, so you could also just send out one email and be like, hey, who's doing this? And hopefully everyone that's doing it would respond and be like, yeah, take a look at our ordinance. And of course, we have all the ordinances on file if you need them.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, that's good to know, Erica.
And Erica, when's the last update that you did on your survey? Is it 19 or?
Which, sir? Oh, on the ordinance spreadsheet?
Yeah, the spreadsheet you have that's so helpful.
Yeah, I think the last update was 19. It's actually on my to-do list this week to add our 2 new CLGs. Yeah, but
okay.
the issue with that is that it's not completely accurate. the more that we've gone back and referenced it, we've found that there's issues there. So it's not going to be useful until we can get every CLG to do it for themselves, unfortunately. So just take that with a grain of salt, but that is also available as well.
You know, Eric, I did look for that on your website just as last week, and I couldn't find it. So maybe I'll contact you and you could give me the link to it.
For sure. Yeah. You know, our website is famously problematic. So it would not surprise me if it got lost on there or it's just in some strange place.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah, I would think we'd be looking at the expanded one for Littleton, since we're very involved with downtown and the city, what's going on with buildings.
So when you say the expanded one, what do you mean?
It's going to have a whole lot of stuff in it.
When Erica referred to the 3 different models that they have, the limited, the basic, and the expanded.
Expanded.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And
Thank
I
you,
agree with
Andy.
you, Rick, but I still like the idea of looking at examples across the spectrum so we can get a sense for where we feel we fall in that spectrum based on what we heard in the comp plan process and what we know to be true.
Right.
I don't know. It would help me to get a sense for sort of the edges and figure out what's important to us.
No, I agree. We have to look at all of them. But Littleton was one of the first cities in the state to even have an ordinance in 1979. So it's not like it's new here. We just haven't done much preservation until relatively recently, though we talked a lot about it. So.
Well, and I have a question. Oh, go ahead,
The
Rick.
National Park Service also has a good document, which I sent to Andrea on what needs to be in a ordinance. And I think I got it off the CPI website, and you'd probably have it as well, those things, Erica, at the state level. I'm sure Mark was looking at that stuff as well when he was doing it, his stuff.
Chris, did you have something?
I did. I guess my thing too is for us to keep in mind that this goes beyond just the downtown. Like I know we're really focused on the downtown because that, you know, that's where our, you know, local district is and we're tasked with the expansion and so forth. But we also need to keep in mind that, you know, we are going to be surveying properties outside of the downtown. You know, we need to start looking at some of these post-World War II neighborhoods. You know, Littleton doesn't just end at Santa Fe. And when, you know, Main Street kind of segs into, you know, and turns into Bowles. So we kind of need to keep in mind too that we're going to be looking at a lot of different resources over the coming years, and to keep that in mind as we look at other communities, you know, different ordinances.
That's a good point, Chris. I mean, this ordinance is for the city, not downtown.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we
city.
get super focused on downtown these days because we're so, you know, embedded in it with what we've been tasked to help Andrea with. But yeah, you know, and we're looking at, you know, getting tablets and getting that survey software so that we can start surveying more resources and, you know, building up our database of information on historic properties across all of Littleton. And so we need to kind of keep that in mind as we start, you know, updating the historic preservation code and the criteria for landmark status as we proceed.
That's a good point. And we do have to keep in mind that we have residential areas and commercial areas. So.
And agricultural, you know, we're kind of, that's, you know, kind of hanging in the back, but, you know, for a while there, we were kind of like, hey, we have a barn that might be coming down. We should be looking at agricultural resources. What do we have left? So yeah, we have, you know, we might not have mining resources like Aspen or Georgetown, but, you know, for us, it might be the agricultural. So we want to keep in mind that we have, you know, a multitude of resources, and, you know, they're kind of spread out. It's not just this one little concentrated area. It's not just the mid-mod mile. we have a lot kind of, spreading out from beyond that corridor.
And Andrew, what would you see our next steps? What would you like from us at this point?
Okay, so I think we have a good group, and let's see, I think what I heard is that Lisa is going to look through her work and maybe she'll highlight some other communities that could work well for us. And I think if anyone else, Andy was going to maybe check in with her contact in Glenwood Springs, and perhaps she has some other ideas too and wants to make some contacts. And if anyone else has further thoughts, send them my way in the next week. And we can include them on the spreadsheet that I'm going to develop for the next HPB meeting in November. So at that point, then we can start to see what ordinances have what, and take a more fine-grained look and kind of pare it down to these peer cities. And I'm very impressed that Rick had looked at 100 ordinances, but I think for this group, it just might be overwhelming. And so I'd like to kind of create a methodology around what I keep saying, these peer communities.
We don't need to do 100. It's gotten much better since then.
Good.
I mean, everything's getting, as you go through the process nationally, you tend to get narrower and narrower on your ordinances because you know what legally you have to address to meet the laws of the United States. And those laws go to the Supreme Court, and that's how these ordinances are set up. So they got to withstand going to the courts. But probably the most important thing, and maybe Andrea, this is something that you could give an light on in your experience here, it's process that messes things up. It's not the ordinance, it's the process. And the process has to be clearly defined in the ordinance, which is causing these ordinances to get quite lengthy, but you have to know all the steps. And maybe just summarizing where you've seen some of the issues in Littleton from a management, from the city standpoint and the preservation board, we can look for examples in other ordinances how to avoid that or address those problems.
Right, and I think just off the top of my head, one of the problems is that we're having, and the board sees it too, is that very minor modifications to buildings per our code need to go to the board. And that is time consuming and costly for applicants. And I think many of these changes could be handled through a staff review adequately. And so if we can work through that, and there will need to be some policy that we're going to look for the board to help us figure out what that should be. What does the board want to make sure that they see in a certificate of appropriateness application? And what are they comfortable with staff reviewing? So that's just an example of what you're saying, Rick, the process.
Yes.
Process can be cumbersome.
Mm-hmm.
Andrea, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
As far as for the next meeting, are you planning on us having the examples of, say, I don't know, just I'm going to pick a random number, 5 communities that we should all look at in order to be able to discuss some of the things we like or don't like about them at the November 16th meeting? Is that kind of what you're looking at?
Well, what I'm looking at is putting the whole matrix out into the packet so all of you can see it. And then from that point, I'll have some sort of a written report, which will give some highlights of what I saw and some themes, some patterns that I saw, things that we might want to look at, and perhaps some recommendations that the board might want to consider with that. That's my thinking on that.
Okay. I guess my concern is, if we get this on Friday and the meeting's Monday, and, there's a bunch of stuff for us to read through in, advance of the meeting, it would be nice to have maybe a little bit more lead time if there is a lot of material for us to review.
Yeah, sure.
Only
Sure,
because
I can.
my weekends are, with moving and everything, my weekends are pretty packed. And so I want to make sure I allot some time to look through that stuff ahead of time.
Sure. And I'll do my best in my staff report to direct the board members to where I think there are areas of interest to look at within that matrix, so that you're not necessarily feeling like you need to
read everything,
digest every cell in that piece of,
okay. Thank you.
piece of paper.
Andy, did you have something, Andy?
Thanks. Yeah, Andrea, that would be so helpful, really. And, even before then, if you're comfortable sharing all this, I'd love to have the 3 model ordinances, or at least the 2, the basic and the expanded, and Lisa's report again. I was just looking, I know I saved that, but I can't find it offhand. So,
and I don't have it, so it would be nice to get that link again.
Okay.
Yeah, just to send those out. We can start kind of thinking and looking and getting familiar. It might make the meeting go faster.
Yeah, that sounds great. And
Thank
then
you.
I think you may have seen also from me that in addition to, once you get the packet in this work, and now also with Lisa's document, which is going to be amazing, I think, I have homework for you, which is to familiarize or refamiliarize yourself with the existing Littleton Historic Preservation Ordinance. I know that not everyone's spending quality time with that ordinance.
Does everyone have that, or would you send it out again to us, Andrea? I don't know that everyone actually has it.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll send the link. It's we do everything electronically now, and so I'll send the link where you can go and find it and read it online.
Thank you.
We can read it on our iPads.
I think it'll be helpful for all of us to have a really good grasp of what it is that we have now.
Okay.
And what I'd like to state too is, as we're doing this upgrade of the ordinance, as the board, as the current board here, think about how you want future boards to manage the historic resources in the city, because we can set the foundation for that. So we really need to be thinking in terms of the resources we haven't formally identified that we know are here. And those are primarily the mid-century modern resources. We know Littleton Boulevard. We know a couple of the formal developments, but there's a lot of buildings spread throughout this whole city. And we also have 3 other historic districts that have been defined and identified that have never been implemented. And those also include early 20th century architecture. And those have never been addressed. And those came out of those survey reports from 1997 and 2001. And even the Mid-Century Modern Report makes recommendations for additional surveys and resources to identify. So we have to think about that. We have some nice churches here. How does that fit into this ordinance? How do you deal with churches in an ordinance? We have a lot of apartment buildings that could be significant historically in Littleton, primarily at the Broadway, Littleton Boulevard intersection area, where there's a lot of them. But there's also a lot of really nice apartments and condos along Platte River, Platte Canyon Drive on the west side that have been there for a very long time that may have some sort of historic significance. So, I mean, it all ties into the historic significance and the criteria that we have to agree to of where we're going to look at Littleton. And then, of course, we do have our cemetery, and it's not going anywhere, but we need to address the resources in the cemetery because they're some of the oldest ones in the state.
You know, and Rick, so eventually we hope as a city to have a preservation plan, just like we have a comprehensive plan, there will be a separate preservation plan. And I think a lot of those questions would be, and topics would be addressed in that plan, identifying, hey, these are the kinds of resources we have, and these are the kinds of, these are the neighborhoods and the types of buildings that we need to make sure that we get surveyed and have a proper way of dealing with in terms of their preservation.
Should we look at a couple of preservation plans at the same time? to see how they approach this?
Well,
One step at a time.
I think we could get overloaded, frankly. I think we'll start with
Yeah.
what we get in seeing the other ordinances. And if that somehow leads us to needing to look at a preservation plan, we could go for it at that time. But let's keep it a little simple for now. Simpler anyway.
Yeah, because we don't want to get the ordinance approved by the council and then find out we missed something big. We don't want to go back and modify it again.
Well,
Andy, oh, go ahead.
ordinances do need modification from time to time. And I would say it's a rare community that gets it perfect the first time through. So let's keep that in mind too.
No, we're on our third time. We have to get it perfect this time. No.
Yeah, but, well, a lot of time.
I know.
It's a process. We don't
There's
have to
a
have
lot
it
to
all
do
done
here.
first time out of the chute, Rick.
Andy had
There's a
her
lot to
hand
do.
up.
I know. So,
Rick, what do you think about the value of at least just looking at the focus areas or priority areas that are in some of those plans? That usually, 4 or 5 sort of bullet statements? We kind of did that recently, something similar.
mhm.
Does that get at your same intent, but keep it more manageable? It might help us consider what our priorities are and the intent behind this code.
Well, yes, I do, because I mean, not reading a whole preservation plan, but the beginning of those plans identify where the character and the resources of the city are. So if we look at cities that are similar to ours with the variety of resources that we have, Arvada is probably one of them that's very similar. We are also a city in a big metropolitan area. So how we deal with preservation here may be a little bit different than an isolated city like Trinidad or Steamboat, which doesn't have pressures that we have in our city being in the metropolitan area.
So what about Colorado Springs then? Would that be
I-
someplace, because I mean, I know they were kind of inactive for a while, but I think I've heard that they're kind of back in the preservation game. So maybe that would be something a little bit more comparable than yeah, like a Trinidad or even a Pueblo that's kind of outside of the metro area.
Yeah, and I did look at Colorado Springs a little bit when I was looking at the criteria. They don't list much criteria, but they have a lot of different types of buildings down there. And I thought Colorado Springs would be an interesting one because it's a little bit more conservative in their approach. And I was just curious of how they were dealing with their downtown area and their resources in that city, which are quite significant as well. And it is recent. It is recent what they're doing down there.
Especially in the area of Colorado College, that part of
Right.
Colorado Springs.
They're trying to rejuvenate their downtown as well. I mean, it's much bigger than ours. And Pueblo, of course, was going to be, I mean, those buildings are monstrous. Those government buildings, they're absolutely gorgeous down there. But yeah,
Pueblo has some amazing buildings. Yeah.
it's just, we got to look at our buildings and just see how our community wants to deal with preservation, right? So, and how we make it easy for people to preserve their buildings and be able to save them and have the teeth to keep them, which our current ordinance doesn't have enough teeth to keep buildings if we need to do something that might be drastic. And every ordinance needs to have that language in it.
Aurora is interesting, and having just served somewhat recently in Aurora, I feel like we didn't have the threats that a lot of communities have, and there's really they don't have a listed downtown district.
Right.
When you look at places, Fort Collins, Loveland, Colorado Springs, Pueblo, Glenwood, all of these communities have kind of this historic downtown corridor. And I mean, Aurora has Colfax, but there's no district there. It's very disjointed. There's a lot of new construction that's gone in. I don't know. It's an interesting position. And I've always looked at that as being, for being the third largest city in the state. it's really hard to compare it to other places because it just grew so differently than a lot of other communities did.
Lakewood's the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, where's the center of Lakewood?
Right.
Yeah, they don't have one. I mean,
It's Wadsworth and
Westminster's like
Colfax,
that.
what's remaining of it. That
And
was
it-
the center of Lakewood. And everything's been removed from that area. So,
And Westminster's like that. They don't have a defined downtown. Centennial is like that, even though Centennial is a much newer community.
Yeah.
They're trying desperately to figure out, or they will figure out kind of where the there is in Centennial.
well, yeah, there was Littleton.
I was just gonna
And-
say,
I mean, Centennial was
Centennial
Littleton.
I don't know that Centennial will ever really have because they just kind of took so much from so many different places.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
so
Centennial
recent too.
is there because of I-25, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But so Andrea, just to kind of wrap this up, if that's appropriate, just looking at time. So you want us to go ahead and if we have something offhand, send it to you this week. Lisa will send the link, and she probably already has, if I know Lisa. She'll send you that link and you'll send it out to us. And then is there anything else that we can do? And in the meantime, you will be putting together your matrix to send out to us, with hope, maybe 10 days before our November meeting so that we can familiarize ourselves with it.
Right. And I think you've got it all. And HPB's job is to familiarize yourself with our existing code, and I'll send out that link. And then just again, if you come up with other communities, send them my way.
Great. That sounds very good. So are we ready to move on to number 2 on our agenda, which is comments and reports? And I would just ask, kind of an informal report. Lisa, did you get the photos that you were looking for, I guess, last month for the legacy list?
I got half of them. So I did want to say thank you to both you, Kim, and Andy for sending me your photos. I went and took my portion, but we still have 2 outstanding sections. So I was trying to reach out to those board members. They're not here tonight to see if they were still planning to do it or if I should plan.
Let me know if you need someone to go out and grab those. I would be happy to do it.
Okay, yeah, I'll check in with them. I checked in with them a few weeks ago, but hadn't heard back. So I'll do it.
Yeah, let's get it wrapped up for you. So just holler. I keep running into downtown for a million things. So let me just run into pictures for you.
I was running into, I ran into one issue where when I went out to take a picture, the people had done a very elaborate Halloween decoration, which I did not want to encapsulate forever. So there's a couple that I'm going to wait, I think, until after Halloween because it didn't make sense to take zombies and stuff.
We're getting that in Denver with a lot of houses that are decorated. And it's like, wow, this is, 20 years, somebody's going to come back and look at this photo and they're going to be like, wow, it must have been October.
Yeah. Well, the one I was looking at had like all these hazard, like caution tape all over. So it almost like something was wrong with the house. But...
And that one Italian residence, that the boarding house, I have gone past that thing countless times, and there's always somebody on the porch. So I don't know if you want that or not, but one day I'll catch a picture of that where there's nobody on the porch. Maybe I'll run them all off.
That was funny. Maybe one day when it's really cold.
Yeah, maybe so.
Monday.
Yeah, but thank you both, Andy and Kim, for sending me those pictures. That was great. Really, really grateful for your help.
And I'm happy to do more, but I can't do it for the next couple of weeks. So the 1st of November, I can go out and snap all kinds of things. So anything you need. All right. Is there anything else on reports or comments on stuff folks might be working on?
Yeah, so Mike Sutherland is with us tonight, and he has a presentation on the ULUC. He wants to give an
Ooh, good.
update on that.
All right, hit it, Mike.
So, hi, Kim. Hello, members of the Historical Preservation Board. Just a couple quick updates on a couple of projects that we've been working on recently. So, as you probably are all aware, on October 6th, the City Council adopted the Downtown Zone District, which you saw earlier late in the summer. So that is now officially part of the code. The next step is to apply that to property in the downtown area and rezone areas of downtown. So the tentative schedule for that rezoning application will be November 9th at the Planning Commission, and then December 1st at the City Council for the first reading, and December 15th at City Council for the second reading, which is the public hearing portion. The Unified Land Use Code project, our next studio session will be on November 9th at 4 p.m. And I'd encourage you all to attend that. We'll have more information on that as we get a little bit closer to the meeting date. But I think it will start at 4 p.m. and last approximately a couple hours. The other item I wanted to draw your attention to, and I apologize I didn't give a report on this earlier, but the CS5 site development plan, which was the northeast corner of Curtis and Alamo, which is the old Irish-Scottish shop and is now an antique shop, that has been withdrawn. The plan for that was to demolish the little house that was on the northeast corner and keep the garage that was toward the northern side of that property line. But that application has been withdrawn, and I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Chris
Is that
has
the
her
little
hand
yellow?
up.
Is that the yellow building?
It
Correct.
is.
Okay. Yay, thank you for good news.
Sure. And that's really all I had, unless you had questions for me.
What was supposed to go in there?
So it was a 5-unit townhome product that would have taken up most of that lot. They would have preserved they would have utilized the garage building that's at the back, at the northern side of that property. But pretty much everything else would be removed, and most of that garage would be added on to. But that whole application has been withdrawn.
Good.
So does this afford us the opportunity to prevent something else like that from going in the future?
Well, the new historic district that we're looking at would probably provide greater opportunity for greater input into what the future of that lot looks like.
Okay, because I know when we did the kind of the downtown walkthrough, I was with Andrea and Rick. There's a beautiful tree, a huge tree in that corner, and then there's a good view of the mill, and we've talked a lot about view sheds from different locations, and that's a geographic landmark that really is important. It's the identity of Littleton, and so no matter where you're at, you need to be able to see that. And so building some of these taller residential complexes and obscuring that view, to me, is detrimental.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback.
So,
Well,
Mike,
thank you for the good news.
so Mike, City Council basically made amendments that are going to reduce the zoning in downtown to some extent, some areas, perhaps, maybe, once you look at it. How involved should the Historic Preservation Board be? on those changes in the zoning that may affect the historic districts and the rest of downtown?
Currently, we don't have any plan to bring the rezoning effort back to the Historic Preservation Board. But the zoning that was created went through the Historic Preservation Board for recommendation. It is true that City Council did make some alterations to the overall heights that were allowed. I think in the downtown mixed use area, the heights were limited from 65 feet to 55 feet by City Council, and the boundaries of some of the character areas have changed. And then there were a litany of other changes that occurred to the ordinance itself. But really, I think the zoning effort, the new zoning district, and the effort to create the new historic district will kind of all come together as part of the ULUC, and how that plays out. Hopefully those will all work together hand in glove.
Right. Okay. And then November 9th is the beginning of the corridor studies.
Correct.
Are you going to look at all the corridors or under the next ULUC phase, or particular ones, or which ones?
It will be all the corridors that look at in the study session, or not a study session, but the studio session that KKC will help hold. That'll include Littleton Boulevard, Broadway, Bellevue, Santa Fe. It seems like I'm missing one. Maybe Mineral as well.
Broadway? Is Broadway one?
Broadway is in that category too.
Okay.
Are you planning on erecting grandstands along Santa Fe so we can enjoy the street racing?
Yes, really.
That's going on there that I'm hearing right now.
Oh my gosh.
It's awful.
It is, but I digress. Okay.
Right around midnight. Awful. Okay.
So, okay, is that, so update on phase 2 amendments to Title 10, you covered that. Is that right? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. And so that's November 9th. It's 4:00-ish, and we should all, if you want to participate in that, they're always
Please do.
They're always interesting. At least they were when they were in person, when we were getting comments in person from citizens. I hope that continues, that involvement continues. Let's see, and then community development staff. Do we have any reports or comments from the rest of community development staff?
Andrea?
I have nothing else for tonight.
And I have nothing else.
And then how about the board members? Does anyone else have anything to throw into the hat for tonight? Yes, Chris.
I was just going to mention, it seems like we're making some slow but steady progress on the survey software. And there was just an exchange of emails earlier. I think the software developer is going to do a little demo with a couple people from the city, just to make sure they're kind of, all the pathways for storing photos and data are, understood and everything. But we are definitely making some progress with it. And so I'm kind of excited to see that come together and get moving on doing some survey in Littleton.
Excellent.
Yeah, Chris and I were talking about that. We would resurvey all these buildings with that software. again, because it ends up more of an architectural description, which would give more information for the board to be able to deal with the buildings in the future, rather than these other surveys, which are much simpler and don't go into a lot of detail on the buildings. So it'd be a lot more work, but we'd have a lot more time to delve into it. But I would encourage everybody to attend the November 9th meeting. Our next critical resource is Littleton Boulevard. And that's one of the few places in the city that we can actually grow. And we know we have a lot of significant resources on that street. And not only on the street, we have resources just off the street as well, that some of them have been identified as significant and others have not. So it's where Littleton grew in the 1950s. I have one other thing. Historic Littleton is going to be updating its website. We have some proposals from 3 web developers. And if anybody on the board has anything that you think we would like to have our website do, because right now it doesn't provide a whole lot of information or interaction with the community. We get a lot of emails that aren't addressed coming through that website, but as we get it updated, it'll be one way, one, to promote what the board's doing, but it will be promoting the resources in Littleton. So if anybody has any thoughts of what you might want on the website or how you want to interact, drop me an email, and we'll be working on that over the next few months.
For HLI, that's great. Yep. And I had a question about the building moratorium downtown. Has that been extended? Is that correct?
Yes, it has.
Okay, I thought so.
In order to do this rezoning effort, we did an emergency moratorium for 90 days, which should cover the rezoning period through that December 15th hearing.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that. I forgot, I left that out of the update.
Yeah, that's a goodie. All right. Let's see. Before we leave, I just again want to encourage everybody to walk downtown and beyond just Alamo and Main Street, all of the streets. Rick and I wandered through all of the alleys, and it's absolutely fascinating to just, I love to walk down alleys to begin with, but it just really shows you the eclectic nature of downtown, the entire football. And you know, that we're in the most beautiful part of the year, the autumn, and it's just lovely to get down there and walk. And I would just encourage everyone to do that. And if anybody wants company, I would be more than happy to go with you.
Okay, I'll go.
Yeah,
I'm always game for stuff like that. But just for fun, because it can't be, you know, more than 2 of us together.
And we have to, Chris, just for fun, we have to walk some of the residential neighborhoods that you've moved into, because those are fascinating too. I mean, you can just see how those subdivisions developed. You can just imagine who those people were that were moving into those houses. After the war.
I'm excited to get a little more settled over there. I'm still doing the slow move, but I've been trying to start running, and I'm kind of excited to be over there so that I can, when I'm distracted by cool historic buildings, I can go farther and not realize how much I've been running. So I'm excited to get over there and just explore more, because we have some amazing neighborhoods over there, and I want us to start surveying them once we have that software.
Great, that would be wonderful. So is there anything else that anyone would like to cover this evening? I think this is a record. It's not even 8 o'clock. This is great. All right, so if we don't have anything else and I'm doing it correctly, I think we can just go ahead. Well, I should ask Erica if she has any questions for us or any comments in closing.
No, just thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Erica. And then I guess we are adjourned. Is that okay?
Mhm.
All right.